In July 2024, one of the most respected medical journals in the world published a finding that should have been front page news everywhere. And yet most people over 60 have never heard it. Nearly half of all dementia cases worldwide, 45%, are potentially preventable. Not through a new drug, not through a miracle supplement, through 14 specific identifiable factors that researchers have now mapped out in detail, factor by factor, showing exactly how much each one contributes. This isn't a claim from a wellness blog or a supplement company. This is from the Lancet Commission on Dementia, a standing group of the world's leading dementia researchers, and the 45% figure comes from their 2024 report, built on data from studies covering millions of people. Today I want to walk you through exactly what those 14 factors are, in the order of how much they actually matter, because 2 of them are probably not what you'd expect, and 1 of them was only added to this list in 2024. This channel exists because someone has to translate all this published research into plain English, since most people never get the time with their own doctor to go through it in this kind of detail. So let's go through it properly. Before we start, tell me in the comments, has dementia touched your family? A parent, a spouse, a sibling? I ask because I think it changes how closely people pay attention to a video like this, and I want to know who's actually here with us today. Let's start with the single biggest modifiable factor on the entire list, responsible for about 7% of all dementia cases on its own: hearing loss. I know that sounds strange. What does your hearing have to do with your brain's long-term health? Here's the mechanism researchers point to. When your brain isn't receiving clear sound input, it has to work harder to fill in gaps, pulling cognitive resources away from other functions. Over years, that constant extra strain is believed to accelerate cognitive decline. There's a second piece too. Hearing loss makes conversation more effortful and tiring. So people with untreated hearing loss often start withdrawing from social situations without even realizing why, and social withdrawal itself is a separate risk factor we'll get to shortly. The encouraging part is that this is one of the most directly actionable items on the entire list. Hearing aids are widely available, and simply getting a hearing test if you've noticed yourself asking people to repeat themselves or turning the TV up louder than you used to is a concrete first step. Tied for the biggest single factor, also at 7%, is one that surprised researchers enough that it was only added to the list in 2024: high LDL cholesterol. You've probably heard about LDL cholesterol in the context of heart disease, but new meta-analysis evidence has now tied it directly to dementia risk as well. Specifically, research pooling multiple UK cohort studies found that for every 1 mmol per liter increase in LDL cholesterol in adults under 65, there was an 8% increase in the incidence of all-cause dementia. That's a real measured relationship, not a theoretical one. This matters because LDL cholesterol is one of the things your doctor already checks in a standard blood panel, and it's one of the most manageable items on this entire list through diet, exercise, and when appropriate, medication your doctor may already have discussed with you. Next, at 5% each, are 2 factors that come from completely different life stages: less education in early life and social isolation in late life. The education factor reflects opportunities in childhood and early adulthood that are largely outside an individual's control at this point in life, so I won't dwell on it, since it's genuinely not something you can act on today, but social isolation absolutely is. Researchers describe cognitive stimulation and social engagement as something your brain continues to need throughout life, not just in childhood. Regular social contact, conversation, and shared activity appear to provide a protective effect against cognitive decline, while prolonged isolation is associated with measurably higher risk. If you comment the word connected below, tell me one thing you do regularly to stay socially engaged. I'd genuinely like to see what's working for people in this community. The next tier, at 3% each, includes depression, traumatic brain injury, and air pollution. Depression's relationship with dementia risk appears to run in both directions. Chronic depression is associated with changes in brain structure over time. And it's also sometimes an early, subtle symptom of developing dementia itself, which is exactly why persistent low mood in later life deserves a real conversation with a doctor, rather than being dismissed as simply a normal part of aging. Traumatic brain injury, even injuries that happened decades earlier, particularly from falls, sports, or accident, has been linked to elevated long-term risk, which is one more reason fall prevention. Something we covered in a previous video on leg strength and balance after 60 connects directly back to brain health too. Air pollution is largely outside individual control, but where you have options, indoor air quality, avoiding heavily trafficked areas during exercise, it's a factor worth being aware of. Now let's group together the remaining midlife factors, each contributing around 1 to 2%, but together adding up to a meaningful chunk of the total: physical inactivity, diabetes, smoking, hypertension, obesity, and excessive alcohol use. Individually small, but notice something important here. Every single one of these factors is also a well-established risk factor for heart disease and stroke. This is one of the most reassuring things researchers point out. The same daily habits that protect your heart: regular movement, balanced blood sugar, not smoking, healthy blood pressure, moderate alcohol, are simultaneously protecting your brain. You're not managing 2 separate health projects, you're managing one. And finally, the second new addition to the 2024 list, at 2% vision loss, specifically untreated cataracts and diabetic retinopathy. Similar to hearing loss, researchers explain this through the lens of sensory input and cognitive stimulation. When vision declines, people often reduce activities, reading, driving, socializing, exercising, and that reduction in engagement appears to contribute to cognitive decline over time. The critical detail is the word untreated. Cataracts are highly treatable, and this is exactly the connection we discussed in our eye health video, where we covered how UV protection and diet support long-term vision. This is precisely why that topic matters for more than just your eyes. So let's bring this together, because I know that's a lot of individual factors. And here's what actually matters most. Notice that researchers specifically emphasize midlife, roughly ages 45 to 65, as the window where addressing these factors has the greatest impact on later dementia risk. That doesn't mean it's too late if you're already past that window. Protective effects have been observed at every stage. But it does mean these aren't just habits for later. They're habits worth taking seriously starting now if you're in that range. Here's a practical starting list. Get a hearing test if you haven't had one recently, particularly if you've noticed yourself turning up the volume or asking people to repeat themselves. Ask your doctor about your LDL cholesterol number at your next checkup and understand what your personal target should be. Make one concrete plan this week to increase regular social contact, a phone call, a standing weekly visit, a class, whatever fits your life. If you've been feeling persistently low or withdrawn, mention it to your doctor rather than assuming it's just part of getting older. And if you haven't had a vision check in over a year, schedule one, since cataracts often develop gradually enough that people don't notice how much they've lost until it's checked. None of this requires a dramatic life overhaul. It requires knowing which levers actually matter, and now you do. If this helped you understand something new today, subscribe, because every week I go through real published research just like this and turn it into something practical. And if you haven't seen our video on eye health after 60 that connects directly to two of the factors we covered today, it's a great one to watch next. Let me know in the comments which of these 14 factors surprised you the most. I read every single one. This video summarizes findings from the 2024 Lancet Commission report on dementia prevention and is intended for general education. It is not a substitute for personalized medical advice. Please discuss your individual risk factors with your doctor.